What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from ActionMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And today, we're talking about Rebel Ridge. This is on Netflix and it has audio description produced by Descriptive Video Works. It's a new Netflix release. It's actually got a fairly decent IMDb and Metacritic score, which is unusual for a Netflix original, but as of this recording, the IMDb is in the sevens, and so the Metacritic score is in the 70s, which is kind of surprising. So, what is Rebel Ridge? Well, it reminded me a lot of sort of like late 80s, early 90s, sort of like loner goes into a small town and he looks like he doesn't belong there, but the small town is corrupt and he has to kick ass in order to make change. Kind of feels like that. It's a little like that, only usually we used to give those to like white dudes like Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme, Patrick Swayze, people like that. They used to just star in these like random action thrillers where like, oh, I see what's going on here. I need to stop it with my karate skills. um, this is a little like that. He also has combat skills that go unrecognized until he needs them. So Aaron Pierre stars in this, and he's a name that we're all going to need to know as his career continues to blow up. He seems to be tapped a little bit by Hollywood. I've looked at less of what he's been in and more of what he's got coming up. One of the things that he's got coming up is he is the new voice of Mufasa in the Lion King prequel movie that's coming out this December. So he's got the voice for it. After listening to him in this, I was like, yep, I hear it. And I was like, this dude's got a low voice. It's great. Love it. But yeah, he plays a black man that basically finds himself in a racist town. He just, he unfortunately has to go to this town to bail his brother out because I guess his brother didn't realize, oh shit, I'm in a racist area. I got to get out of here. Small town sheriffs, corrupt and they're all running their own scheme and no one's the wiser. I guess still in 2024, people can get away with this, even with all the internet and everything. And there's still sheriffs that are like able to pull off what this guy is. And this Don Johnson is the sheriff here, which initially gave me some pause. I'm gonna be honest. Even after Don Johnson was in Watchmen for HBO, I still don't really think of him as somebody who's being attracted to films like where people are like, oh yeah, I'm making a really great film. Who am I calling? Don Johnson. So it kind of felt like, yeah, well, this is standard Netflix movie of the week stuff. And coming along for the ride also interesting because I was like, oh my God, they did grow up. Anna Sophia Robb. Every time I see her name in like an adult role now, I'm like, you're an adult now. I feel so old. I feel so old. She's like a badass cop now. It's just like, I got nothing, man. I don't even know what to say to this. That from all the way back in the day when she was a child actress, it's just like, wow. Like her, Dakota Fanning, like some other people, it's just like, this is how you know you're old, It's just... So Anna Sophia Robb's in this, playing a grown-ass woman now, and David Denman is in this. I didn't really recognize any of the other names. James Cromwell, by the way, pops up for like a hot second. I don't want to say I didn't recognize his name, but yes, I did recognize James Cromwell, but he's not in this very much. So that's your cast, and some other random faces playing other various forms of corrupt racist cops in this town, and they're basically looking to stiff this guy. The Without going to spoil too much, his brother is in jail, so he's riding his bike to bail him out, and he's carrying an inordinate amount of cash on him at the time, which leads it to obviously be that cash goes missing. And then he doesn't have the bail money, and the cops have his money, and he wants it back. He wants at least his cousin or brother, cousin, maybe it's cousin. I don't know. He wants the dude back, and he's at one point he's willing to walk away. He's like, "Listen, that's all I want. You know what I want." And then Don Johnson's like, "You're just not in a place to negotiate." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're just waiting to get yourself shot in the face, aren't you?" You're just like, this movie is gonna lead for you to be, oh my. So, did I like the film? I don't consider it highbrow. I'm kind of amazed at the ratings, because I think this is just kind of like a random action film that could have gone to like literally anybody that I listed had this movie been made years ago. I feel like Wesley Snipes would have made this movie like 20 years ago, you know? But it's Aaron Pierre, and he's not really, I guess, known as an action star, so maybe that makes it feel elevated. But no, it just feels like any run-of-the-mill 90s action movie with a sort of like a mid to low budget Fire Down Below, you know. I'm trying to think of other movies that you just kind of like walk into a scenario and you're like, oh man, this is not going to be good. Oh, wait a minute, our hero is trained in combat. We're good to go. Thank God, because if this guy was not trained in combat, like, this movie would be way more interesting if this dude was not trained in combat, because then he'd be like, oh man, how am I going to get this money back? I have no skills whatsoever. But of course, this guy's a badass. So, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, Netflix has already put out far worse films this year. And what I'll say for Aaron Pierre is he is absolutely, he feels just right in his role. Like, you know, like that right fit of jeans, just like a perfect fit, perfect casting. Even though I don't know that he's an action star, I think he's just somebody who had that sort of gravitas. I don't know what he looks like, but I do know what Mike Colter looks like. So my blind thing was just kept imposing Mike Colter into this film. It's weird how my brain works. It's like when the audio description starts popping and the film is going, my brain is basically trying to play some version of the movie in my head. And so it just kept, Mike Colter was in my movie. I don't know if Aaron Pierre looks like Mike Colter, but I was like, I need a dude that's ripped, who looks like, oh man, but can also act, because I think Aaron Pierre has the dramatic chops to be able to pull it off. So he gave a good performance. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes long. My biggest problem with this is the runtime. It overstays its welcome, and it has pacing issues as a result. Like, it has, instead of it just being able to go in, go hard, defeat corruption, it has all of these like downtime moments where we have like conversations, or we like learn things, and we get quiet for a little while, and we're like waiting for the next thing to happen. And the film just kind of loses its steam, and then it has to build it back up. And this film could be like a freight train. This film feels like it's headed to be a freight train. Like, there's a catalyst, we get the setup, so we know what it is. It's pretty basic. Dude needs to get family member out of jail. money gets stolen must acquire money and or find way to get family member out of jail by fighting the corrupt police. Got it. Done. Somehow we made a 2-hour movie out of that. You know what I'm saying? Like somehow that's and it feels very stretched. This feels like all of the problems that I say in other reviews about Netflix films. Like, I don't think they test. I don't think they use test screenings. I don't think they see a purpose in them, because what they're looking for is they're looking for content creation. So they're not always, I think directors think that that's a great thing because it allows them the freedom to be able to make a movie that they want to make. But some people need feedback, and when there's no feedback being given to you, that doesn't always mean, even me as a film critic, I appreciate feedback when people offer it to me. I mean, some things I can change, some things I can't change, some things it's like, oh yeah, I'll work on that. And some things I'm like, oh yeah, well, I could do better on that. I mean, I do actually listen to the comments and try to parse out the trolls. Some people who are just obviously just trolling for, people who are like, you look like a murderer. It's like, I don't know how that helps me, but that's been a comment before. Like, I specifically, like, one of them, like, which one? But yeah, so I think everybody needs feedback, and I don't think Netflix gives any feedback. I think they just release films. I think they are slightly concerned with certain tires, and those titles get feedback. I think something like a Maestro gets feedback because they're like, okay, this is our Oscar play. We're spending a lot of money in it. We've got bigger than we usually would have stars in it, and we need to make sure that this film lands. So Maestro gets a test screening, but I don't think Rebel Ridge, which I assume is not making an Oscar play this year. I could be wrong, but I assume Rebel Ridge isn't. I don't think it tested. I don't think anybody looked at it and was like, oh yeah, because we hear through the grapevine about these films that have test screenings, and they pick up films from festivals, like Amelia Perez is theirs this year, that were already sort of like made in a completely different system, and they're like, yeah, we'll acquire it, it looks really good. But for movies like this, or for like Trigger Warning, I don't think these movies get any feedback. I think the directors are just left to their own devices. Every once in a while, something just works, and great. It's just like all the pieces kind of just fell together for the most part, and you're like, that's amazing. It's like accidentally handing your 3-year-old like one of those like 5,000 piece puzzles, and they like almost got it all, and you're like, I did not know that puzzle had that many pieces, but my toddler has figured this shit out. That's amazing. Like, it kind of feels like that sometimes. And so the fact that Rebel Ridge is watchable of its own accord, without feedback from Netflix and without feedback from test screenings and stuff like that, I think is somewhat impressive. But I feel like if it had test screenings, it would have run under 2 hours. You can't tell me there's not 10 minutes in here to cut. I'm sorry. You just can't. I would have cut more than 10, but I think in general, this movie's runtime is longer than a lot of other better films this year that were able to tell their story in a nice, contained little block of time. And I think when you want to sort of attack, like a flurry of punches, you got to keep that pacing going. You got to keep the thrill. You can't let the suspense drop. And for me, the suspense dropped a lot. Like, I was just sitting there and I was like, well, we're waiting for this to pick back up. Oh, it's picking up again, So yeah, pacing was just my biggest problem. I didn't have a problem with the acting. The story is I'm not gonna say it's like revolutionary, but it works for the film. Like, obviously, it feels like it immediately gave me vibes of things I've seen before. The title is incredibly generic and means nothing, but whatever. Uh, it's just like cool. It's just like, oh, it's a place, whatever. Rebel Ridge, Rebel Ridge, and it's sadly going to be something that's just going to be forgotten on Netflix. I don't think anybody's going to remember it in 5 years. I don't even think people are going to remember it in like 3 years. I look back on some films that I reviewed like 3 years ago on my channel on Netflix. I'm like, what is that? I don't even remember that. Like, what does anybody remember this? Is anybody watching this still? Netflix has a few gems that people remember that sort of pop and stand out. And they have a lot of stuff that's like this, that just kind of, it's hot for a minute and then it just fades away. So anyway, I thought the audio description was really good. Descriptive Video Works. If for no other reason than the fact that we're actually defining people racially. Now, we kind of have to here because the film is kind of about race and kind of about this. Clearly, obviously, this dude is being, tagged racially. Yeah. Even though, like, this film isn't going hard on, throwing out racial slurs and stuff all the time, but it's all kind of implied. It's very much like wrong neck of the woods. But it's like a 2024 version of wrong neck of the woods where they're like, we're racist, but even we don't use that word, like, yeah, I don't know. It's so, it is, so the fact that everything's defined, it kind of has to be here, but I'm somebody who brings it up in other times too, when, when there's clearly casting that is intentional, and that casting ends up not making it into the audio description. Representation matters, and I hear it a lot from other blind people of color who, all colors, not just black, but who like seeing themselves represented in media and just aren't through audio description. I know one lady posted, when I was asking about the stuff that she posted, she had like an emotional experience when she found out Idris Elba was black. Like, she was black herself and had been watching content and did not know, as a congenitally blind person, that who he, like, what he was, and had already seen him in a few things. And then somebody was like, oh yeah, he's black. And then she was like, what? And like, I guess you can miss stuff like that if nobody ever brings it up, if nobody really ever talks about it. Depending on how it seems silly because you're the type of person who's watching film reviews on a YouTube channel. But to people who just kind of sit down and casually watch things on Netflix, it's like, okay, well, I know who Idris Elba is. Maybe she watched Luther. I don't know what the films were, but yeah, maybe it's possible that if you watch the right content with Idris, that you just don't know. And things like that just shouldn't happen. We should be making it like through people's careers without being able to define that. So, yeah, I like the audio description here. The action scenes are well described. There's nothing really here that's wrong. I thought the narrator choice was fine. If anything, because there's so few women here, the choice of having a female narrator was good because it wasn't like another male voice jumbling things up. There are like, I want to say like 2 prominent female characters, but there are way more male. There's way more male characters. So her voice kind of pops. It was a good voice. As a narrator, I'm not really familiar with, but if I was hiring at DVW, I wouldn't mind hiring her again. I thought she did a good job. And I think she's capable in any genre. From what I can tell, there wasn't really anything about it that stood out to me as being like necessarily like, oh my God, she's great for action, but there wasn't anything that was like, oh my God, she's terrible for action. I thought it was just a solid narration track. And because the film has pacing issues, it doesn't even really feel like it is that hard of an action film either, because it allows itself to drop back a lot. It feels like it's trying to be some sort of like indie action film almost. Like it's like, well, we need to stop for a moment and pause and take a breath and have a conversation. It's like, no, you don't. You don't really need to do that. You just need to keep going. God, did anybody see Roadhouse this year? Roadhouse had, Jake Gyllenhaal was more than comfortable. Just like, I need to punch something. Give me something to punch. He wasn't looking for character development. He wasn't like, oh man, I just need to sit down and have a nice conversation. It was like, I need to punch something. That is what this movie is. I know what this movie is. I know why I'm here. Yeah, so whatever. It's okay. I liked it enough. It's certainly, I've seen worse things that Netflix has put out this year, but I think I've also seen a few titles that I liked more. I'm one of the few people who like Damsel. I enjoyed Damsel. I know some people out there, they're tired of seeing strong women in female lead roles. And that movie got dragged a little bit, but it didn't bother me. I thought it was a good film. I like Millie Bobby Brown in that, and it had a pretty strong cast. So this falls short of that for me. But I'm going to give Rebel Ridge a B-. I'm excited for Aaron Pierre, and I want him to be cast in more things. And Don Johnson, yeah, it's I think Watchmen is sort of like the pinnacle of his revival. And Anna Sophia Robb, great to see her back. So check out Rebel Ridge if you miss those 90s movies, late 80s. I think the trend started in the late 80s and then moved into the 90s. That's kind of when we started getting our action stars, but they started having sort of like domestic action. We didn't need to send our action people. There was a trend. I know my review's done, and you're like, what is he still talking about? So like there was a trend before, obviously with films like Rambo, Commando, even like Predator, where like we had to send people somewhere to do the action, where they couldn't do it domestically. They had to go fight overseas. Even Chuck Norris had movies like that, like Missing in Action. We kept sending people, and they kept fighting in like jungles. Sometimes it was tied directly to a war. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was just like some random conflict. Then we started kind of moving them home. That's the trend that I'm talking about, is when the thrillers started being like about small towns, people kind of walking into like regular situations. Even Die Hard arguably is that. It's just a dude doing his job. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just a regular guy just working, here. But it's a great action film. So we kind of got that trend. And it's not the buddy cop trend, because this is not a buddy cop movie either. And those were big in the 80s. That popped. But there was kind of a trend where we were like, you know what? Maybe they don't need to go to a jungle in the middle of nowhere. Maybe we can just make that action film happen here. Maybe. And we did. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you guys on the other side.